talk a little bit about beer. We're talking about beers that you have on draft. The big thing I want you guys to draw out of this is, all right, first day you were a server, you probably weren't the best server in the world. No one usually is. We learn things through repetition. All right? What we want you to learn and take from today is acknowledge that there are plenty of different beer styles. Okay? And what I want you to be able to do is be able to take the beers you have in draft or a bottle and be able to put that beer into a style, through classification. So that way too, through a period of time, through repetition, you'll learn and then you'll pick up a little bit more about that style and the variations of beer. Okay? We're going to go through a little bit of history. History is always key. I'm kind of a big history buff. All right? History repeats itself. All right? History in beer repeats itself. We learn a lot. The reason why we do the things we do today in this industry is because of stuff that's happened in the past and we learn through history. Okay? Then we'll get into beer itself a little bit. We'll talk about some of the styles and depth and Jeff stuff. We'll break it down more from a brewer's aspect. All right? And then at the same time, if there's any questions at this, we stop and ask them. We said really more towards the end for a lot of questions, but if you have a question of what we're talking about at that time, just stop and press on. All right, how many beer drinkers do we have in here?
Tony's a huge beer.
Nice. There are a few. All right. We'll see a big shift. Typically, even with the female population, wasn't a big beer drinker. If they did, it was light beers. All right. Now we're seeing a shift that we're actually seeing a lot of women getting involved back in beer. The styles of beer. All right. That's why I always tell everyone. A lot of people will be like, oh, I don't like beer. All right. We just haven't had a beer that you actually like. There's all different types. Lambics, from sweets and sours, to hoppy, to malty. So there's a lot of characteristics with beer. Beer plays key in that, but also plays a key in food. All right, so we're going to jump through history here. So we're going to speed it up and slow it down a little bit at certain times. All right, beer, there's really no known date to beer. All right, but we do know the Mesopotamians wrote down 19 recipes on a tablet. Okay, and what they did was they actually traded with a surplus of beer that they did have. All right, and then that was about 4,000 BC. All right, now about 3,000 BC, we actually see that the Egyptians were big in the brewery. They actually put how they brewed up in the hieroglyphics on the walls. And you can see that females were actually the ones that were the brewers. All right, and then fun fact note on that, all right, the pyramid stonemasons, okay? This is how we get the word cash today, all right? Simply that's what they called the beer that they paid the stoneworkers with. So beer is now, for the first time, really seen as a monetary value in this trade. It's money, all right? And about 2000 BC, this is where we actually see the Chinese. The Chinese are actually writing down manuscripts. They're writing down beer recipes. In about 500 BC, this is now beer is the official drink of the Olympics. This started the whole Bud Light football campaign right there. All right. And about 49 BC, all right, this is the first documented toast where someone sat in front of their troops, which was Julius Caesar, and toasted his troops to a victory in battle. Right? Now what happens about this time? The fall of Rome happens. Okay? With the fall of Rome, basically it puts all of Europe back into the Dark Ages. A lot of things happens in the Dark Ages. Basically, every progression, technology, advancements, learning, everything kind of stopped. You know, everything got really repressed. Okay? At the same time, too, we had the Black Plague was going on. So people did realize that they could drink beer, and it was safer for them than drinking water. So they realized that beer is food, but beer is life. All right. Now, at the same time, what happens at this, what's a crucial point in time, is the monasteries. All right. Like I said, everything, technology kind of stopped. People really could experiment with beer. They just made it a basic beer. All right. But now the monks. The monks had a lot of time on their hands, and they weren't really interested in women. So what they did was they started brewing beer on their off time, which was pretty much all day long. All right. They really started experimenting. Right now, if you're familiar with any beer terms, a single, a quad, a double, a triple, those are all Belgian usually terms. Right? I think the monks were really simple, and a single simply had on a jug, had an X on it. That was a single. Right? They brewed another beer, and they're like, wow, man, that's 2 times as strong as the first one. All right, now we got a double. So now they got 2 X's on that jar. So forth and so on. All right, now in 768, this is the first recorded of hops being actually used in beer. All right, now we'll get back to why hops are so important and why hops really played a part of beer here a little bit. But it was really important because it started to change the aroma and the flavors, the hoppiness, and the bitterness of the beer. All right? And in 1200, this is where we actually see the Germans. This is where they actually start doing consumer laws, basically regulating or writing down saying, you know, this is a beer, you got to make it this way, you got to serve it this way, you got to use these ingredients for it to be called. Really loose laws. All right. Now we go into Europe. Now 1215, Magna Carta takes it a whole other step forward. Okay, this is the ale standards. This starts separating, and this is where the English were more involved, as far as what was an ale, what classified a pale ale, what classified an IPA. Now, question: who knows what an IPA is? Okay. Question: how did they get that name? Yes, exactly. They learned. Very good. Yeah.
Well, you know, Eric, we can't hear back there. Can you say it a little louder?
They had to add more hops to the beer going overseas because it would spoil. They more hops added.
Very good.
Same thing, we go back to beer safer than water can drink. Okay? And these are long journeys that the English started doing when they would go to India to trade for spices and everything like that. And beer was food, beer was life, but they also, the sailors like to drink. And by the time they got to India, the beer was getting stale. So they learned through a period of time that the more hops they added, simply would increase the shelf life of beer. Hops are a natural preservative. Okay, the oils in the hop help preserve the beer. Right? We necessarily don't use hops today for that reason, just because technology and everything else advances. So we don't use it for the preserving the beer as we do for the flavors and the aromas. Okay, but simply a sailor would point up when he was loading up his ship, and he's going through, and I'll take 5 rope, and I'll take give me that India beer, the India pale ale, and that's how that being kind of started. All right. And then about 1420, all right, this is another key crucial time. This is when lagering, all right, lagering started to go with beers. And we'll get a little bit more into lagering so you guys understand what lagering is in a little bit. All right, 1516, all right, this was I can never say the first word, so you know, reader, purity laws. That's all we need to know, the purity laws, all right? This is once again now the Germans, and this is pretty much a standard that a lot of people use for many years. All right, it hasn't been up until recently, especially with the American craft brewers, that have really taken a lot of those laws. What the brewers said back in the day, like, hey, this is what you have to have in a beer, this is what this beer is. These guys are basically taking those laws that were given to us and throwing them away. You're coming up with all crazy new styles of beer. So they're creating categories as we go. You got it. All right. And then about this time, this is the time that inns, right? Inns and taverns all across Europe are flourishing. Right? It gets people together, just like how we are today. We're drinking beer. At the same time, too, this is the time point in Europe that we're talking about revolutions. All right. Now we're going to speed it up to the Americas. Right. Americas, we got 1587. All right. Growing up was the first place in the continental U.S. that brewers beer. Beer was brewed. And 1629 was the first commercial brewery. Right? Now in 1667, this is really important because this is where we actually start to enact our first consumer laws here in the United States. Basically making sure that people aren't serving snake oil and passing off as beer. Because remember, beer isn't just something you drink. Beer is money. Beer is trade. So it's also very important. All right? And then about 1862, the government caught on all this. They're like, wow, you know what? We can tax this and make money off beer. All right? And this actually helped fund the Civil War. All right? Now, at this point in time in the U.S., this is where I say history repeats itself, especially here. All right? It's right before 1920. Okay? Prohibition. All right? We have breweries all across the United States. All right? Much like your guys' dream, or your theme, your motto here, it's going to be drink local, eat local. That's what everyone else was back in the day. Simply shipping was a lot harder. So we had micro craft breweries all throughout the whole United States. Every town had their own brewery. All right? But what happens? Prohibition happens. Right? Most of the breweries can't survive prohibition. Some of the breweries, like Weidenkugel's and a few others, they turn to soda. They start making soda and other various drinks. Most of them all shut their doors. It's simply because up until April 7th, 1933, right, people can't sustain that long of a loss. But what happens? We get beer back. All right? But when we get beer back, we've already had government's hands in it. All right? Now what the government wants to do is the government still wants to control beer. All right? They want to control the number of breweries that are out there. All right? And they also want to control the ABV. So that's how we get the almost near beer, 3.2% alcohol. Okay? And what happens is this suppresses beer. It totally changes the profile as far as the American drinker. That's really where you get the American into the American lager. And then obviously in the late 80s and early 90s, really when light beers came about. But there was still a good limit on the number of breweries that were in the United States because of government control. All right. Now, 1978, this is where the law started to change. All right. The law started to change. Why? Because the consumer demanded. Consumers like, we want better beer. We want a variety of beer. We don't want these limitations that I can only go to the store, I can buy these 3 beers. All right. That's why we're here today. All right. So this is Jeff. And let me get through the next part. Sorry, I didn't get home until midnight from St. Pete's. All right. Where's my sheet? All right. All right, go to the next pages. All right, we're going to talk briefly about beer itself. All right, beer's got 4 key ingredients. All right. If you look at that very top chart or whatever, what I did was it's got a sliding chart there as far as color of beer. So this guys will help you put beer into a category. So you get a little bit more familiar with beer as far as they use a more darker, a brown malt, a black malt, which will give it obviously even if you use like your stout categories, your porters. Okay, the barley. All right, barley is going to definitely be the soul of beer. Right? Malted barley is also sweet. Okay, what happens is when they put the barley in the mash tanks, they put it around, they see all the barley starts to release all these sugars and stuff. And then what happens when we get to the next key ingredient, which is going to be yeast. All right, yeast are going to attack those sugars. All right, they're going to go in there and they're going to start eating them up. And that's how we get alcohol. All right, much like with Red Rising, when they attack the sugars to the beer, we get alcohol. All right, and so that's the yeast part. Yeast is definitely going to be the life of beer. All right, hops. Hops are going to be the spice note, the aroma. Okay, this will also give us a nice bittering effect to beer. Like I said, and as we learned from previously in history, this is what helped preserve beer. So that way people could shelf this beer and keep it for a while, and they would have beer that would last them through the winter. The Cellar Wall was actually a winter lager that the Belgians made. And then water. Waters are definitely a huge key ingredient in beer. You'll see that most of the breweries today, these gentlemen included, they go through a huge purification process. The big thing is the consistency. They got to make sure their water is consistent to make sure that their beer is consistent. All right, we can go to the next page. This is where we'll start to get a little bit more interesting on beer. All right, the next page. All right, this is going to give you kind of a sliding scale, so you can kind of put a couple of different beer styles as far as their taste profile. You know, a hoppy beer, a fruity beer, scaling down all the ways to the sweetness, the darker, a maltier beer. All right, but this is where we get to the important part of beer, that there's only 2 styles of beer. Okay, we have ales and we have lagers. Okay, this is an easy way to remember this. Remember, lagers low. All right, lagers are actually brewed and stored at a lower temperature. Okay, and they're also used bottom fermenting, so it's low yeast. All right, that's where where we went back to, and so it started changing beer, is people started experimenting with beer. They started putting beer into a cave, into a cellar, and then they realized that wow, this totally changed the taste profile instead of me just keeping it up top in the bar area. All right, then we have ales, the other style of beer. All right, ales, same thing. You're going to be stored at a higher temperature. And they're going to have top fermenting yeast. So we have ales, high temperature, top fermenting yeast. Lagers, lower temperature, low fermenting yeast. And then everything off that branches out to the different styles of beers. This next sheet It's definitely gonna be a good cheat sheet for you guys. We're just gonna do it, this is gonna put, help put a color and also a descriptor of the beer. Okay, and then on the far right column, you actually have some of the large macro brands that you can kind of compare it to, so you can put that beer into a category. So then now you guys can start putting beers into categories. All right. Now one question I always have, or a question, a tool to help train you guys. All right, simply when you go to a table, I know a lot of times people will be like, well, what do you have on draft? Okay, and a lot of times you'll start off right from the get-go. Don't get me wrong, Bud Light pays my light bills, but the company I do deal with the craft brands. And most people are like, oh, we got Bud Light, we got Ultra, we got Stella. All right. For you to learn these beers and the beers that we have in the bottle, what I do is I challenge you to walk up to the table and ask them, what style of beer do you like? So the person goes, well, you know, I really just drink Bud Light. Okay, so you like lagers. Okay, well, great. We actually have 4 different lagers in draft today. We have Bud Light, which is American Light Lager. We have Ultra, which is another American Light Lager. We have Florida Lager, which is going to be an amber lager brewed here locally. We have Stella Artois, which is going to be a Pilsner brewed in Belgium. That way now you can take, and it helps you put beers into categories. Right, simply by asking the style of beer that someone likes. All right, they go into the pale ales. Then you'll simply look as far as what type of pale ales, what type of IPAs. Anybody got any questions as far as up to this point? What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to Jeff for a little bit. Jeff's going to get into a little bit more detail as far as the styles, a little bit about the brewing process, and then also a couple of his brands.
Hey, how y'all doing? Yeah, as Ronnie mentioned, I'm really here to kind of describe it on the layman's terms as far as taste and things of that nature, because he went into the aspects of what styles of beer there are, and that's very important as we mentioned. But I want to describe it more and how you can understand it and how I came to understand it when I first started in here. Basically, as mentioned, all beers are either lagers or ales. Basically, what that breaks down to is your ales being a top fermentation. You'll pick up the aspects like the hops and the more bittering, floral aspects of beer. With a lager, you're going to pick up, being a bottom fermented, it's going to pick up more of the malt, the thicker, earthier aspects of beer. So basically, when you go up to a table and somebody says, well, hey, I like, like he's mentioned Bud Light, and you can point them in the proper direction. With your ales, taste-wise, they're going to be lighter in body, but a little more bitter in taste. With your lagers, you're going to have a thicker body, but it's going to be a smoother taste. So I'm not sure if we're going to do that today, but we were giving out little samples. It is a little early, so you can. But I'll tell you what, if we don't decide to do that today, just one day, why don't you do this? Pour a little shot. Oh, you are going to? Okay, we're going to do it. So never mind. We'll give you a try here in a minute. Like I said, really mainly what we're trying to do here is to get you all to categorize beer. I used to work in the tasting room for a brewery. Somebody could come in, we had 15 different brands at any given time. Somebody could come in and tell me 2 beers they like. I could tell them every beer they would like and every beer they wouldn't like, just by a couple of different, keynotes as what they drink normally. So one other thing I do want to point out is even if you don't like a particular style of beer, I'll give an example. I was doing a promotion for a beer that we had as 321 White IPA. IPA is a stronger beer, it's a bitter beer, and not everyone likes it, but it is probably the largest category, of beer right now. Everyone loves IPAs right now. When I did this promo, this girl, she didn't happen to like IPA, so when I mentioned it to somebody and she said, oh, it's awful. And okay, well, it's awful to you, but it might not be awful to this person. So this is an important part of why we're trying to get you all to understand the categories. Just because it's something you don't like doesn't mean it's something that person doesn't like. What she probably liked, which is something like sorry Ronnie, but like a lighter beer, like a Bud Light or something like that, a person who drinks IPA is not going to like that. So whatever's your taste doesn't really come in in play when you're trying to find out what beers people like. One other one I wanted to tell you all about is our Swamp Ape. That's a double IPA. Now, Ronnie went into the IPAs, basically flavor profile wise, and he explained this, but an IPA is a stronger, bitter beer. A double IPA, what that basically equates to is we use double the malt, and that brings up the alcohol. The Swamp Ale that you have here on tap is 10%. 10% is a strong beer. Most of your beers run about 5%. So when you're serving this to somebody, you're actually serving them 2 beers. It's just something to keep in mind, as you're serving, just to protect you and protect the long doggers and protect anyone out there on the road. Basically, with your IPAs, like I mentioned, you're going to have a stronger, bitter taste to it. With something like our Florida Lager, it's a very malty beer. As I mentioned earlier, malty, lagers are malty. That's the earthier, kind of smoother aspects of beer. One other one that you do serve here at bars is a cider, and I just in case anyone doesn't know about ciders, ciders are not beer whatsoever. Ciders are in the sparkling wine category. Basically, what we do with cider is we take an apple juice, ferment it to an apple wine. Then we do a secondary fermentation. This is some places don't do a secondary fermentation. We do a secondary fermentation where we add champagne, yeast, and sugar. So basically, what this is a real mild sparkling wine. Just so anybody, and the same holds true for your other ciders. Like I see how Angry Orchard here, ciders are all in that category. So when you're talking cider, you're not talking beer whatsoever.
I had a question.
Yes.
Since the Angry Orchard is like a gluten-friendly beer,
All ciders are
they all?
They're all gluten free.
All of them are.
Yeah.
So just remember that.
Because basically gluten is your malt, is your grain, which malt is basically grain. It's a partially germinated grain.